Hello everybody and welcome back to Wappelville. I'm just getting things set up here for our next little live session. I'm gonna discard of this right here if I can. There we go. And we've got something from Marvel Crisis Protocol again. We're gonna take this and we're gonna make him bigger. And you can see what we got here. We have Captain America. We're gonna try a few new things with this. One of the things I want to actually do here is a little comparison. So we've got this Lamian medium from GW, and we got the Green Stuff World Master medium. I'm assuming these things are. Hey, Trevor, how's it going? The test is successful. Chat is going, which is really cool that I can just sort of start in on this. So let's see what these two things do. Now, I'm going to get these out of the way. We're going to use Green Stuff World paints. You've seen me use the washes, the inks, the other things. Hey, first and last is first this time. How you doing? Now we learned, well, we learned in the Patreon video. I'm gonna see if I can. Here we go. So this is a miniature I did. It's one of my new army painting series. We painted this all exclusively in Green Stuff World paints. Well, what we notice is that these, like other paints, Save and Creature Caster, they don't particularly enjoy being on a wet palette. So this is the same old wet palette, but it's kind of dry. You can see there's not a lot of liquid sitting out here. You can see how the paints are just sort of in their little blobs like that. That's why I wanted to try these mediums to see, does the paint like these a little bit more. Hey Aviad, how's it going? That's really cool. Yeah, I think this is maybe more the normal time. I think I started kind of early on the last few. So again, this is Army Painting Series 14 right here, and you can see we used a bunch of different violets and such. But the thing we definitely learned is, for whatever reason, and again, other paints are like this, the Green Stuff World paints like this, they just don't like being in a wet palette. So we're going to see what happens. There's another little twist we're going to do here. This is something I talked about in my last video where we sort of were scumbling and stippling. Well, I found a couple of makeup brushes here. Now, the only one that's really ideal is this one right here. I think I've used some of the other ones and beat those up. But there's some other ones here. I'm going to give these a shot. And what the idea is, we're going to just sort of, it's not really dry brush. Don't think of it as that. It's really more of a stippling type technique. Because what I want to do is actually have him backlit. So from here, almost like there's a street light hitting him. Oh, hey, first last. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, actually, oh, and Fruity Toots. Sorry, not the other way. See the Instagram address right there? Yeah, you want to shoot me a message there on Facebook with questions? Go ahead, because sometimes those questions end up becoming lessons, like tonight. What I'm gonna do is eventually zoom in on this a little bit more, but for right now, this is kind of a vigorous approach. But howdy, everybody. Welcome into the room here. Now, what we've got is just sort of a black. We've got this blue-gray dusk here. I think this is woven gray. And there's a white. There's your black stallion, whatever. We've got a flaming orange, a cutthroat red, and we got this right here, this peach color right here. We've used this for flesh before, and we're going to do that again. And just for the heck of it, too, I also threw this blue out here. Just sort of a straight up kind of an ultramarine sort of blue. Now, what I'm actually going to do first is, let's see if we can throw out a little bit of glazing, actually. So here's some. This is going to be the master medium here. Now, one thing I can see right away, this is, oh, that's thicker. That is way thicker than the Lamian medium. Oh yeah, substantially thicker. I have no idea what it's going to do. We're going to find out. I'm going to put a little bit of blue into this. So we're going to make sort of a blue-black wash out of this. I'm going to clean that brush because I want the medium to stay. Does this make a contrast paint? Let's find out. Let's see what happens with this. All right. Yeah, in a way, it sort of does. And it's definitely dependent on gravity. And you can see how it's collecting there. Now let's change this up a touch here. Let's not have it be only that color. So now we're going to make this more of a gray. So now we're going to use actually a little bit of Lamy and medium in here. I'm going to pull some of that away, and we are just going to drag this down. Now this is not a complete, what would you say? What the heck is zenithal priming deal or whatever. I don't really even like that term. It's just all I did was shoot some lighter primer on it. This is actually something that Kathy had prepped. She was going to be painting this, but then we sort of switched out. We switched out just a little bit, and I was actually going to do a whole different thing with this myself, but then I changed my mind based on the last video that I did. And that was speaking of Instagram, that first last mention there, you can see, that's my latest post, talking about the Mears Miniature Snakes, and that was the Pro Acryl Transparents that we used. So then we're just doing an overall glaze on this, and you can see that this part of the glaze was actually not entirely as translucent as what was up here, because that blue, well, guess what? That's kind of a transparent, high intensity blue, and this gray that I used, this wolf gray, whatever it was, that definitely had some kind of white in it. In some ways, there's a lot of similarities to the Creature Caster paints with these GSW paints. So I'm going to actually take a touch of that, work that in with some of the black here. Even maybe a little bit of the orange, just to get that off of the bluish color. Oh, Al Capone, how's it going? So what we're doing is I'm going to make my screen bigger so I can actually see some stuff here. Oh, hey Falcon, how's it going? Believe it or not, the chocolate was there, but I never got a chance to mess with it because we spent, I believe it was 4.5 hours on Sunday just cutting out the Christmas cookies. I will try to film the process of decorating them tomorrow. I don't know quite how well that's going to go. I think what we're going to do is just get some of the sculpting chocolate and we'll just play with it here. We'll do some special videos here where I've got my camera and my setup and everything else. So we just did a little bit of glazing right here. And as a quick review here, we're just comparing, where'd that go? Here it is. Lamia medium and the master medium. Oh, there we go. First last just answered that. So far what I'm seeing is that this is significantly thicker than the Lamian medium. And you're asking, well, okay, what's the deal? Why use a medium at all? Why not water? Well, I'll bring this one back. As I was painting this and working on this color test figure, that's when I learned that it sort of liked medium better than it did water. Actually, this was fun. We did some sand thing here where we got the sand kind of being kicked up by the horse. That was a lot of fun. So we're just gonna let this thing dry in some areas. Now, again, what I want to do, and I'll maybe do some of it here. So the idea was to take some of this and make it a little bit, see how much drier that is. And I'm just going to grab something here like this. And the idea is just to do see, kind of a smooth stroke like that. And here, let's start to lighten it up a bit. See how we're just kind of almost scumbling that. Here, let's lighten it up again. I think you can see what's happening here. It's actually a little bit of wet into wet blending. Let's do a little bit more here. We can glaze over this too, but now something like this, obviously the larger the surface is, the better that's going to work. But you can see there's kind of a transition here from dark to light. I wanted to play around with it, see what would happen. I know you normally see me doing the long brush strokes with the craft brushes. So here, this is just going to be a little bit drier, maybe, than you see me work. Now again, there's some wet paint around here. But let's just see what we can do with this. Now maybe I'll even go with because remember, even these brushes we can stipple with these guys too, especially if they're a little bit more run down. So here, let's do a little bit of stippling, but we have some wet paint here. Means we can do a little bit of wet into wet blending. Let's see. I'm gonna look at the. Yeah, now the Green Stuff World, their first paints were sort of the fluorescents, then the washes, then the intensity inks, and then they did the metallics. Now I actually did. Oh, it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to get to. Here we go. So then they made some metallic paints, and that's what we did with this right here. Oh, they did those chameleon paints. We won't really discuss those too much because I really like the metallic paints. Actually, to me, it's a much easier way of doing some sort of color shift for sure. Then they came out, I think it's 50 basically regular acrylic paints. And I've been using those. Like I said, I tried them for the first time on my. Nothing like trying out a new paint line on a new army on figures you'd never painted before, because hey, why not? Now, this paint definitely is reacting more kindly to the reduced amount of liquid here on the palette. No doubt about that. Yeah, let's darken this down a touch. And I'm just waiting at this point for some of the water and washes to dry on the actual miniature itself. You can see we're already starting to concentrate some more of this, barely a touch of orange over here. And this is that whole sort of street light effect. The other thing too is can I make a shadow here? Can I make some form of a shadow here? So let's do something like this. So we're going to go back in again. And I guess the other thing too, the reason why I wanted to play with this is I've been kind of retraining myself a bit here. Where'd you go? Been playing around again with some oils. So this is what is this? The Warcry Untamed Beasts, right? Messing around with some oils on non-metallic and other surfaces. Now I am gonna jump up my brightness a little more. I had that turned down because this thing was practically white. So I'm gonna keep looking at the chat here. They did, yeah. The color shift. I would just the problem with those is that you can't shade those, and they work on things that are maybe 10 inches tall or really large things. But well, something like this, you start to run into issues because you just cannot shade those in the same way. Now, if we're doing this on the base, we certainly have to start getting some of this light onto him and onto this. And I'm just starting to indicate that real quick. This is just sort of an overall sort of thing. So what I'm seeing is I'm probably actually gonna go to one of my worn out craft brushes pretty soon. So again, this right here is going to be a little bit maybe more true color, definitely more in the line of bluish grays and that sort of thing. But on this side over here, we're trying to essentially get a little bit of almost like he's lit by a street light. I think that comes from all those mornings way back in the day, standing on the street corner waiting for the bus at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning in the wintertime, when here it's just dark. And that street light sort of casts that, well, kind of a pallid yellowish glow, greenish yellow glow. Okay, so we'll just, all we're trying to do is indicate things real quick here. Real quick. But on this side too, we got to go the other way now. And I'm certainly not going to wash out the brush because, well, that sort of eliminates the whole idea of using this a little bit drier. Oh, hey Bethany, how's it going? Let's see, House of Color used to make those. Found the pigment was really big in them. That was the other thing too. you could see the pigment grains in there. Now on their metallic paints that I used, that was not the case whatsoever. Not the case at all. So go figure. Well, I guess you can figure that because one thing you're trying to do the whole color shifting and all that sort of nifty stuff, and then the others you're just trying to go with regular metallics. So I can see that. So I think you can see what's happening here. We're not worried about red. We're not worried about anything else. What we're just trying to do here is create these two opposite light sources here. And again, I might go with an even smaller brush, but one thing I notice here with the GSW paints, and if this was, say, the Reaper paints, I could go drier with these. I could also, say, take a paper towel or something like that to dry those out. Now, speaking of oils here, there we go. So this is just straight up parchment paper right here, and the whole idea behind that was to take some of the oils out. You don't want all of the oils out, but it takes out some. So that's I was trying to, in a way, set up the same thing here. So hopefully you're doing okay there, Bethany, sorry. It's been another very long day here. It's going to be a long day tomorrow. That cookie decorating exercise. Well, I know when we bake the cookies and try to decorate them on the same day, that is an exercise that begins in the morning, and last year didn't end until, 11 something o'clock at night. So I'm actually going to go now with a smaller, here we go, smaller brush that's still on the, I don't want to say frayed side, but the idea, all we're trying to do is figure out where do we want more of this bluish color. Well, here it has to be a little bit lighter. I know he's got the white there. We're going to indicate real quick some light here, star, and then I'm even going to start to block in a little bit of red too. And this is more like some of you ancient shellbacks, you old veterans, you would recognize this more as just a kind of traditional shaded base coat type of thing. And we're just going to get a little bit smaller here. And all the while, we're trying to avoid things like the white for sure. And we're trying to use just a more of a stippled brush stroke here. Now this stuff here, the general almost moonlight color, that can't be too, you don't want that to be too light. It's going to overwhelm what we have going on back here. Now, without cleaning anything here, we're going to try and work in some red now. A slightly used brush. They're always slightly used. Actually, I have to remember not to, well, because I haven't cleaned them yet with my rubbing alcohol, I don't necessarily want to be grabbing the oil painting brushes that I've been using. Because that was something most of today was dedicated to oil painting. And the whole idea there again, just to get back into the swing of that. Just to sort of bring it back into my consciousness again. Alright, so we indicated some red there. And I do believe I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. I think that is it. Yep, everything else is just basically brown. So we'll reduce that down a little bit. I'm going to go a little bit more intense on some reds here, but you're also going to see with these highlights, they're sort of like spokes from a wheel. Think of this really more as a wheel, and it's something you can do on other shields. Maybe they're not quite as shiny as this one. And you can see trying to follow what I did with the white there. Now I'm going to go back into, so even here, that's the one thing I did notice about this paint is it tends to be on the liquid side. That's why I just kind of have to keep water away from it. It does cover, so it's not like it just doesn't cover or something. That's not an issue. It can be like this. That's just with some medium in some of those areas. But look at this. You can see it covers. Now I barely had to touch. There's no white mixed into this or anything like that to make it more opaque. That's why I compare it more to, say, the Pro Acryls, because those, they just cover the heck out of everything. What's weird about these, and it's because you're sort of mentally comparing stuff. Oh, she was supposed to be tidying up the studio. Well, that's this. It's always bad news when I do that here, because anytime I try to tidy something up, things go missing. That's a guarantee. It's the first thing that happens is stuff goes missing. So it ends up really being sort of a useless exercise for me. I try to do it once in a while still, but yeah, doesn't necessarily work so well. Now I'm gonna bring back this brush here. I'm gonna see if I can't just scumble in. Here we go. Yeah. So I'm trying to get some light to go through here. So almost like there's, like, again, this shadow sort of being cast here. Now the light's probably a little bit more from the side or lower than maybe a street light would be. I think, what was the last one that we did with, oh yeah, that was this one right here. So here you had your light source coming from underneath. So that was the Hellboy from Mantic. The studio after Catzilla was locked there all day. Yeah. Yeah, cats tend to be a very destructive force on almost anything in the house. I'm actually going to let just a little bit of this work its way down here. So, see, again, just think of this as just preliminary here. Remember, we're talking about the spokes of a wheel. Only some spokes are a little bit bigger than others. Just think of it that way. And now we're trying to do that whole sort of stippling thing here. Like I say, it's probably, say, the Marvel Crisis Protocol cars might be an easier subject for this sort of a thing. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, so I think you can see from above here, this darker, lighter, and we're just trying to shoot the light this way. Let's get maybe just a touch more here. Because remember, we are just trying to plot out some colors. We are not trying to do anything precise at this moment. This is all part of that shaded base coat. Only here we're taking just a little different approach. A little bit of a different approach. Now let's maybe get some kind of skin tone on him here. Or just make something real quick. Yeah, it looks like right there. Again, going to let some of that bluish gray undercoat show through. Not worry about any sort of details whatsoever. You're going to grab this lighter gray. Again, all from Green Stuff World here. Just start to indicate a few things. And this is supposed to be more of a white, so let's try and make that happen. And I think as we gradually work our way through this, and again, see I'm sort of stippling that. It's a little bit different a brush stroke than you normally see me use. Let's see, I know this is supposed to also be some kind of white here. And then we have a lot of brown over there, but we won't mess with that just yet. Because we can now go back the other way, because we've added some lights. Now we can start to glaze back again. And now I'm going to try some of the Lamy and medium, see what that does. So we've got the Lamy and medium, a little bit of the blue there. Going to hit the mask here, and if it ends up being too much of a pure blue, I'm going to knock that down. But at this point now, we can start to bring back a little bit of the details with some of these glazes here. And in some ways, it could still be considered part of the base coat. Now, I'm gonna do here. Let's grab a little more of that Lamy and medium there. I'm getting a little bit of a different reading as far as colors go. Here we've got these straps. I'm gonna just make this more of a darker blue up here, just because it feels right. Let's see, and we'll sort of just do a little bit here, tiny bit up here. So it can function. It does sort of turn the Green Stuff World paints into what looks a little bit like a contrast paint in a very minor way. Now I'm going to take more of the black here. This is the Lamy and medium that we're using. Now we're going to do some more glazes here. Don't be afraid to just take your finger and wipe some things away. Going to hit the pants here, and that should generate some of that detail back again, and then I can wipe away some of the excess, as we typically do. And that here, that can even start to control some of that, the light coming from the street light here. We start to darken that down. Even here on the shield. So that's the, what is that, the Lamy and medium sort of mixed in. Is it easier or harder to control? That's kind of gonna depend on you guys and how much control you feel like you need over things. So now I'm gonna try and really get some shadow into this. Let's take some of that away. Alright, so like this, and now we're going to dry this out, and then again we're going to scumble this here. And much like contrast paint, it wants to start leaving water lines right away. So that is a significant difference, because if you saw the snake dudes that I did there and used the transparent paints, well, because they're more like the Reaper Clear and liner paints, yeah, you don't have to worry with those about creating watermarks. But here, that is something you're definitely going to have to worry about. Which means you got to work fast, and by fast I mean really, really, really fast. So again, the Green Stuff World paints, they are really thin, but they sort of cover very, very heavily. It's a weird sort of combination. It's like this. This is that black. It's really, really thin, but yet it covers. When I did this with the transparent black, it didn't cover, and that's the Pro Acryl transparent black. Here, let's do some more of this. And when people ask me, so what is this going to replace the Reaper paint? No, that's heck. If I could just paint everything in oils, I would. I wouldn't even be using acrylic paints at all. But the Reaper paints, they'll always be my favorite thing. They're not necessarily going to be your favorite thing. Heck, you maybe not even going to be able to get them where you live, because outside the US, they can be a little bit difficult to get. That's one of the reasons why I started using some of these other things. Now I'm going to throw a little bit of red and green together here, see if I can't craft a brown. Yes, there are browns in the... I might just grab some of those too eventually, but for now, just going to try and make my own here and work with that. I'm going to grab a little bit of orange here. That just tends to, the red, orange, and green, that's going to get you a brown. Let's get these. I think pretty much all of this seems to be supposed to be brown. Again, I don't read comic books, don't really know anything about comic book characters, so this is kind of have to do these things blind. Just kind of flying by the seat of the pants here. Again, I'm just going to hit these with some of this. It's got some of the medium mixed in there. That's why it's acting so much like a glaze. And what you have to just be willing to do is sort of endure the part where it just doesn't look like a whole bunch. And then you start to go back in later. Now let's hit the face with some kind of darker glazes here. And once I've got this going, then we can start to work back in. Then I can zoom in the camera a little bit here. And then you can see some things. And sometimes with this, I just kind of have some fun. And this is actually the skin color glaze, and what the heck, I'm putting it all over the place here. Because why not? Because I can. Because I want that side to look very different from this side. Oh, hey Ken, how's it going? Let's see how much more I can make this guy get closer, if at all. Yep, sometimes they just don't cooperate. I'm just going to go with a little focus on that. I'll just hold him closer to the camera. Again, let's work on our spokes here. I'm going to darken those down because remember the whole idea is that this is a little bit on the darker side. It's not supposed to be broad daylight or anything like that. Now we're going to start to maybe work in colors that start to fill in, because when you do a lot of glazing type stuff or that initial stippling and such, it can be a little bit on the rougher side. This is where we can start to fine tune those things a bit. Because I have my whole palette out here with all of the colors. There, I'm going to make this again a little bit bigger so I can see what the heck I'm looking at. And then we'll sneak some of this on the underside here. That helps to indicate that again, the light from that light source from above or whatever it is, that is changing our color. And something like this, I guess some folks, well, that's a limited palette exercise. Well, is it really all that limited? I know we had this discussion in the session on the Lord of the Rings, the ring wraith that was black, that it's not really limited whatsoever. There's just all kinds of color in it. Not necessarily the type of color that first comes to mind. Not necessarily lots of bright oranges and reds and greens all right next to each other. They are sort of mixed together to make something a little bit more chilled out. I'm even going to get a little bit of this bluish gray into the shadow areas of the skin tone there. Man, I don't even know, not quite sure just how much of the white I'm actually going to need to use, because and this is supposed to be in a darker setting. Now there was another thing too about the Green Stuff World paints, is that they have a tendency to be on the shinier side. That's the opposite of the Creature Caster paints, which are on the extreme matte side of things. So what I sometimes did every once in a while, I would take some of the brush on anti-shine here and hit that. And what that does is it just tends to knock down that shininess. It really does a good job of it. And I guess it's not shiny as in gloss. It's, what was it, satin, I suppose, is the word I'm thinking of. Yeah, probably more like a satin. So you can see here, the stuff that starts to work its way away from that street light or whatever, well, it just gets that cooler color. Not really going to mess with the underside of the shield here too much because you can't really see it too well. We will spend our valuable time on other things. I'm going to assume that the wings on the side of his, well, not so much a helmet, that those are probably white. I'm just going to guess. Like I said, I looked for a bunch of references, but as always, depending on which artist is rendering it, or what movie it might have been, whatever, you're going to have differences. So at this point, not really adding much more of the medium, because it seems that that little bit goes a long way. It really goes a long way. So I'm seeing actually a little more blue in the trousers, so I'm going to focus more here. I'm going to get just something that's a tiny bit warmer here. And I'm going to see what we can work into. But see how that covers so much? Now we're going to use that same sort of stipple. That's another reason why I wanted to screw around with the stipple brush technique on this. Because when you use the longer flowing strokes with this, I don't know, every paint is different. Absolutely every single paint is different. There's no two that are, well, you would hope there's no two that are alike, because if Reaper, Pro Acryls, Vallejos, and this were all exactly the same, what would be the point? There would be absolutely no point in buying just anything aside from one paint line. So I think that's something maybe to ponder when you're looking at a paint line and everybody else is buying it or whatever. It's the hot new thing. Before you shell out Boku bucks. First of all, figure out, do I actually need the whole line? If there's 50, 60, 100 colors, do I actually need all those? Or could I maybe just get the ones that I think I'm going to need on my current project, spend a whole bunch less, see if do I like those, and then maybe get some more for your next project that maybe needs different colors. This is something you're going to hear me preach more and more and more, because I keep getting questions like, oh geez, do I need to buy the whole line? And that is something, well, that question's never ever going to get a yes from me. I don't care whose it is, even all the Reaper stuff. What do I use? Maybe a dozen Reaper colors? I use them in darn near every single thing that I do. Yes, but aside from that, I don't I don't have tons and tons of Reaper colors because I don't need them for what I do. Other people, maybe that's a whole different story. Could be a very different story for other people. Let's do some skin tone type things here. You can see I'm just taking some little bit of red, a little bit of the blue, a little bit of that peach color here, and not peach cobbler. So it's interesting. I wonder if it's almost as if there's some kind of guard over the nose. I don't know. So at this point now, I'm gonna see we can, if we want, we can start working with some smaller stuff here too. I just have to remember to use the medium as opposed to, say, water. I'm just used to using water, kind of by instinct. Let's just get some kind of facial features on him here. Again, all of the detail things, I'm just not going to fool around with those right now. And I'll check the chat again in a second. I just have to sort of focus in on what I'm doing right here. Feel free to ask questions all the time because, like I said, they can formulate the lesson. This is another thing, too, is that why I shy away from any kind of white because it just tends to be very bulky. It just tends to be really bulky like that, whereas stuff that's the more white something has in it, the bulkier it just gets. Oh, and Fruity Toots, I'm going to give you a black and white. And actually, well, maybe this comes from being in a watercolor class, and it was the same thing with oils too. You were given one color to paint with. I think it was Van Dyke Brown or something. That was your one color that you got to use, and you painted for 2 months with one color. Halfway through the year, I think you were still only using 3 colors. It wasn't till almost the latter part of the year where you got to use a full palette. There was a reason for that, just so that you weren't fighting the colors and all that other sort of stuff while you're trying to learn about composition and just how the heck the paint flows. Because obviously some of us were new to watercolors. Well, all of us pretty much were. And that's another reason why I sort of advocate not using a whole ton of different colors. Well, whether you're starting out or not. And because I know they get a little bit worried about mixing and all that sort of stuff. And I realize that. But really, mixing is, if you just sort of give it a little bit of thought, it's not as difficult as people think it is. I'm gonna go back over here now to more of the sort of street light color here. And I'm also going to be painting in some darker effects, some shadows. But sometimes it's one of those things where you have to be willing to work back and forth. To be working a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, sometimes in the mid-tones. But yeah, actually, to be honest, this stuff, to me, it almost feels more like it just is best as a stippling paint. It quite literally works better that way, which is strange. You just wouldn't really think of, yeah, it's better. You're better off using this paint kind of with a stippled brushstroke, but it actually does. It's easier to use that way. Now, I do have to be careful that it doesn't get too orange here, because then it's going to look like he's being lit by some kind of fire, and we don't necessarily want that. Even down here, if I want some little bit of an edge there next to his foot, the street has texture anyway, so I'm kind of alright by doing a little bit of stippling here. I know his shield is kind of blocking that a bit. I have to, actually, I'm just going to get the water entirely off the palette there so that we don't just absent-mindedly grab that. The other thing too to factor in is, well, you got shiny here, you got what? You got spandex and metal and shiny things, so the streetlights might be kind of inclined to reflect off of that a tad. So here, let's see if we can't get this area a little closer for you. So that's what I'm doing here, is that sort of stippling effect. Not necessarily looking to put cloth texture in there, although side benefit, cloth texture. And I suppose the more, let's say, you render it or whatever, the more you're gonna get a smoother finish to that. Let's do some. Let's look on the boots here. Get a little bit of, yeah. And like I said, there's 50 different colors, so there's plenty of browns and other colors that you can use. Just trying to see what works with what we've got now. Let's. I've got a little bit of a brownish or kind of a black blue mix again here. Just gonna reinforce some lines. Again, this is what we used. It's got the medium in there. The the details on these, now they're digitally sculpted, and sometimes the details on digitally sculpted things, especially when a company maybe is a little bit on the newer side, we'll call it maybe a little shallow, a little soft. So sometimes you have to paint those in, whereas other companies, their stuff, the detail is there. If you just do, say, a little bit of a glaze or something, detail pops right away. And again, it's going to depend on, always depends on the companies that you're working with. And like I said, I know that these things, they're horrifying when they start out. It's just, it's kind of the nature of the beast. You have to be willing to kind of endure those early stages where things are just, oh my gosh, what in the world is he doing? Or if it's you doing it, what the heck am I doing? So now we're just trying to work in some darks here. Gotta remember, use medium here. And again, we're just going to stipple that in. We're starting to work in more of this darker blue here. So I haven't really looked at whatever art that they might have for this to see how they rendered it. I suppose I could have done that, but I just didn't really want to do that. Sometimes I just want to try and have more of my own interpretation on things. Don't be afraid to just, when in doubt, take your finger and stipple with that. Because, hey, it works. And now that starts to get a little bit darker. Things starting to emerge here. And I realized just at first it was just such complete chaos. See, we're darkening our reds. We're enhancing the spoke effect on the shield there. I'm going to drop my brightness down a tad. As always, especially with the Green Stuff World paints, I'm going to go more with the stippling. Yeah, for whatever reason, that just seems to like the stippling better. And I'm going as dark as I can on the red there because, well, we want this light to show up, but without having to notice, I haven't touched, I mean, literally, I used a tiny bit of white on, say, the eyes or whatever. But I'm not even using white to lighten this. I'm actually using a little bit of the bluish gray. And that's how that does actually lighten it, but it keeps that from being a little bit too here. Now this is just, that's kind of on the soft side there. I have to figure out, I'm going to grab some of my red here. Where's that? There's the medium. A little more medium. Let's see what happens. Now I've made that sort of transparent. That's really transparent. This is not typically how I work. I try to do this, well, it's the same reason I'm going to be hitting you with the oil stuff. Either later this week or next week. I think the Patreon page, I've got some videos that I'm working on for the Patreon page that are more oils related. And then I'll start to do those in the live sessions. There's a couple of reasons for that. But yeah, though the Patreon page, that just flashed across the bottom of the screen. And, well, as Trevor did some calculations, I've kind of shortchanged myself by about 100 hours worth of content, because when you do the Army Painter pledge level and you're new, oh my goodness, you get somewhere in the neighborhood of 240 hours worth of videos, and that's no joke. That is for real. Heck, by the end of this week, it's going to be more like 250, because I'm working on a whole bunch of videos this week. So yeah, there's just a wee bit of content on the Patreon page. No doubt about it. You can see that the one brown mix that I made, we're starting to work our way into that with a little bit of that. It's almost like a Space Wolves gray. Maybe it's about a Space Wolves gray, actually. More I look at it. Now, before I forget, I want to actually throw a little bit of a rust effect in here. Let's see how this works for rust. So we got our orange over here. I'm going to take some of this junk, some red, more of this green junk here. I'm going to take some of the medium. Now some of the Lamian medium. Now you can see it. And I'm just looking to get some rust over here on this grate. Now, in the past, what I've done is, in the recesses, put the rust in there, only realizing that, okay, is there like a river of rust? And the rust would be on the grate itself, not in the liquid or the water that's underneath that grate. So, yeah, that was lesson learned. Lesson learned. Sometimes even I learn things, usually the hard way. Oh, wait, let me see here. Oh, Ken says force perspective. Let's restart. Yeah, it's well. You were there. You saw the. And I'll grab the other one there. Where is he? Here we go. Yeah, remember it was just a few minutes in when all of a sudden he looked like he was on fire. And here we had a little less of the object source lighting, but we still had some there on the shoulder pad because of that. Was it that Ultron, right? Yeah, that was Ultron. Again, here, yes, these have to be slightly warmer. They want to be. I don't want them to be gray. Let me see if I want to see if I can walk that shadow up a little bit further here. I always have that green sitting over there. I'm going to approach it this way because then maybe you can see it. So we're going to just stipple this thing again. We're also, I just realized that if I'm doing this on the street part, I got to do this on the grate too. How is it miraculously avoiding the grate? So yeah. And at this point, again, some of these things are still just basically, we're still trying to map this thing out, figure out what we want where. I'm going to grab more of this green. A little more over here too. And that's going to be shadow there too, I would think. Let's see if I can't get a tiny bit more there like that. Now, I just realized that we have to sort of show the other side of this. I think you can see what's happening now. Again, I can go with the stippling effect here because, well, there's a lot of texture on that sidewalk or whatever that is. Now let's get work in some darker tones here to indicate some kind of a shadow here. Whoops, there. But it can't just be a flat shadow. Even shadows have color. Shadows have shading. Yes, they do. They, in fact, do have their own shading. Crazy as that might sound, that is the case. So again, just trying to work in darks, details, where possible. And we've got the little wings on the side of his head here. I got to figure out just how those are to be rendered. And then here, I think now we can maybe start to separate the different bands here. Trevor's at 241.87 hours. That include. Oh my goodness! So it's wow. Yeah, that's. Let's just call it scary amounts. And I think I was just going by. I was just taking Army Painter series. We're on number 14, right? 14 or 15, and I was just multiplying those by 5, and then there was the 28 Dark Sword episodes. But I kind of was forgetting that I just filmed on the Workbench. What was that? 29 or 28 that I just posted earlier today or yesterday. And I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, that starts to make sense because holy smokes, there's a lot." And it covers everything. And they build on each other too. So there's, like this one is actually building off of a video that I filmed the last couple of days. It's also building off an existing army painting series that I'm working on, because now this is something that the folks that are watching that not the Rohan, the Harad series, now they can see how what I'm doing on those Harad warriors plays out in something that's entirely, in terms of genre, sculpt. I mean, you can't get much different than this from, say, that Rohan stuff. I mean, though it's kind of impossible. All right, let's get ourselves now maybe a little more. See what kind of lights we can get in our skin tones here. Again, using medium instead of water. And instead of the white, going with that sort of peach type color. But I can't go too bright on his face. If I do, it's not going to look... Yeah, I actually need to go more with... I must have to gray it down, green it down. But I also have to... I mean, he's kind of supposed to be clean shaven too, so I have to think about that. And I don't necessarily want to make his face too dark, but you can see even in that one in the lower right hand corner there's some decent amount of darks on the face. Now I also want to try and give him some decent eyes in here too. Oh, let's play around here with, for his, really not a helmet, more of a mask than a helmet. Interestingly enough, now the one in the lower right hand corner, that shows it as more of a going around his eyes, but here not so much. So like I said before, I'm kind of melding several different references together. Now this, I'm trying to get more of a, just a blue in here. I still want it to have some grayed down a bit. But we're trying to give it a few indications where there's, yeah, there is sort of a lighter blue here. I'm even just going to take that, throw it on the pants, and then sort of scumble it in with my finger on the shield here. Let's find a place where we can, yeah, I think here we can go a little more with the blue, less with the yellow. Now let's intensify. Let's see if we can't intensify the red in some places. Maybe we can't. And maybe some of these spokes are going to be less of the yellowish color and maybe something more like the ambient light. And just don't be afraid. You don't like something, just wipe it away. Just wipe that away. And I might throw just a touch of orange in there. I'm looking for it because, actually no. Actually, what I'm going to do is go the other way here. So now it's not going to turn pink because we have enough of the orange in there. But I just took some of that, again, some of the gray. Because I was just looking at the shield that we see in the reference there over to the left. What I'm trying to do is have spokes that are actually sort of rival colors here. So some are more of the yellowness of the, let's throw a little more in there, of say the streetlight color, and then maybe some cooler reds to indicate, like here. So So again, a streetlight spoke, but then maybe these spokes going to be a different core temperature. And let's just keep modifying that. Again, I'm going to grab some medium to maybe make it a little more translucent, because you just have to keep in mind always with these Green Stuff World cores is they tend to cover way more than, say, the transparency that you see in them might allow. Yes, I think we're starting to see how it starts to shine up now. But it's a process. It's you lay the groundwork, and then you start to, from there, see how we start to indicate more. That becomes more of a solid line. And I don't want it to be just a rock solid line. I want there to still be some sort of width change to it. Here, let's get some of that edge there. Not sure how much later I will go, but oops. It's going to go over here then. Again, just taking whatever that lighter bluish gray is, mixing it with my red. And I can even now start to think about some of these edges here, because these are separate little, they seem to be divided plates, so we'll paint it that way. Now at this point I'm just gonna, no, I'm still gonna have a little touch of that red in there. Yeah, I'm trying to point this where you can see it pretty well, because there is a little bit of the satin finish on this. It can be a little difficult to see. There's some, again, some shininess on that. Now I will go with some of the yellow here. Again, that's sort of your street light indication. Not much with the words there. Okay, maybe now we'll add just a touch of our white to that. I could just take a lighter yellow too. There. And you notice I'm still doing the same stippling effect there, because that's just what seems to be effective with this. Every paint is different, boy, that's for sure. And once again, I was just instinctively reaching for the water, and then realized, no, I really need to just kind of grab the medium. So here, let's get some of that yellow over here too. So let's hold it this way, and now you can again see the wheel spokes really start to emerge. And then I'm gonna grab a little touch of white in here. I'm gonna make sure I hold this where you can see it. Gonna use a little bit of the medium there. And what I'll do also is I'm gonna go back into this area with some of my darks and solidify the separation between those areas on the shield. It's weird, most would say, okay, what's your center of interest? Well, it's always the face. It's always the face. Well, I don't know. His face is not really what you know him for. It's this shield over here. So maybe this actually has to take precedence over stuff like the face. once again, get some separation there between those two areas. And sometimes these little tiny details are a little bit tough to do in a live stream, because when I'm actually doing small details, I am actually holding my breath, that sort of thing, and that doesn't make for the greatest television in the world, that's for sure. We're in the age of the talkies, not silent, and there's definitely no music playing in the background. Not looking for YouTube strikes. Well, actually, it would all be very generic. What is that? Royalty free YouTube music, YouTube approved, which is okay for opening and closing credits. A little less. I don't know if you want to hear that for 3 hours in the backdrop behind me. I certainly don't actually want to hear it for 3 hours behind me. So now I'm going to, again, we're going to take some, that's the Lamian medium this time that we're using, and I'm going to go over here on this side and start to pick out a few edges here. I don't want it to end up looking white, but we definitely want to have some shape in this, so I'm going to make sure I keep going with the bluish gray too, and then we'll do the stippling thing again like we talked about. And what I might then do at a certain point, or not too far in the future, is actually maybe take some of the Army Painter Anti-Shine and actually brush that over the top of this and kill some of that satiny shine, and you'll be able to see some things easier. Now let's start to work some of these folds. And I think I'm gonna actually have to get some of my cooler, or not my cooler color, but actually some of the lighter sort of street-like color over onto his pants here too. Now, I think I have in my pocket here a flat, yes, got my little flashlight here. Actually, it's also a cat toy, but we use that as a little laser pointer for, all right. What I'm going to do is turn off at least this light. So let's see what kind of a shadow we should get. Aha, okay. So see where his legs are there? Now let's hold it more this way. I'm just trying to, aha, okay. My shadow is starting to line up, but maybe I need to, I'm going to back this away a bit. Okay, so I see the changes that I got to make. Well, it's kind of where it needs to be. Believe it or not, I think this is the one edge that I'm going to need to work on a bit here. So just give me a second here. I'm going to switch my lights around. Here, just going to move this one out of my way. Now I'm going to go back to my regular one. Where did my brush go? There we are. So this actually is going to need to maybe walk its way over this way here. But before that happens, I need to get something on these boots here that's more of a cool gray color as opposed to all the warm gray. And this actually needs to be a little bit lighter down here. I didn't realize it's indicating kind of a bluish color. So I'm going to throw in some more of the blue into this, and we're just going to stipple that in. I'm going to just stipple some of that in. It's so different from, and I'll show you in a second, what I did with, oh, what the heck was her name? Captain Marvel. This is Captain America. That's right. I don't know if I actually wrote this as Captain America or not. I might have just mistakenly actually wrote Captain Marvel for some reason. But here's Captain Marvel there. So you can see we had all of the shiny stuff. So you can all of those brush strokes are very linear. I was using, I believe, my typical usual Reaper paints there. Whereas here we're trying a whole different type of paint. Brand new for me. Only used it a few times. And I talk about this to folks that know me all the time to try and prevent that whole notion of, well, yeah, this person just automatically knows everything about all the stuff. No, I try to make it more like when you're using something for the first time. That's why I use things for the first time. Because to me, it makes it more like we're both sort of starting from the same place, and I think that can help. That can help people sort of get over that. They get a little bit disappointed in themselves. They have expectations. I mean, we all sort of do. That's kind of inevitable, I would guess. So again, just indicating in some of these areas a little bit of that blue. We got some seams and such here that I'm going to emphasize now. Not quite sure how light I should go with stuff like that. I'm going to get a little more of the blue in the face there. Like I said, detail can be cloudy on some of these, like even here on the lips here. Not quite sure what's going on with the face here, so I'm just going to have to basically make something up here. I remember, some sculptors, well, like with Reaper, you got to know the sculptors, and well, and you still do today. A certain person, they sculpt a face a certain way, and heck, even with GW, faces are sculpted a certain way, and you sort of just know in advance. Whereas with something like this that's new, you can't underestimate just how important it is, the difference in how somebody would just sculpt a face. That can make a big difference. How is it that they do the cheekbones and the nose? Do they give you high cheekbones to work with? Or are they really shallow? And is it tough to get your lights on those? Here, like I said, a lot of your details are just kind of on the shallow side, which makes some things a little bit more of a challenge than others. Just trying to find some lights on the ears, on the cheekbones. And I think on these wings, I'll let a few lights hit those too. Now I'm gonna, you saw I just let a little bit of the white work its way into there. Because at this point now I want to start thinking about, yeah, especially here on the top of his head, that needs to be light. Oh good, it says Captain America, thanks. All of a sudden there's one of those, did I actually type in the wrong thing? Because I did something, yeah, I typed in, it was not whatever it was that I typed in. Or I thought I had typed it in and then hit enter, and it just actually kept what was there from the previous session, and that wasn't helpful. I'm gonna, yeah, let's get some more of this, a little more of the white into here. Same thing on this part of my spoke here. I'm trying to have this sort of be the dominant spoke, which means more of the white in here. Let's see if I can't work in a bit of an edge light on the side of the star right there. Yeah, this is so shallow here. It would be easier if it wasn't there, because then I could just paint it in. I know there's different schools of thought as far as, okay, should certain freehand designs be sculpted in or just left to the person to freehand in there? And I'm definitely of the mindset, just let me take care of it. Well, I can understand why they try and have that detail already sculpted in there, because now people in effect don't have to deal with the freehand. They just sort of follow the lines and they get something like a freehand design. Now I want some touch of midtones here in these pouches or whatever they are. And I can, now here, this is much more, see, I'm using the longer strokes because I've got so much of the medium in there. But now I'm going to try and do some lighter indications here on edges that are facing up, yeah, towards our street lamp, our ostensible street lamp. We'll just say there's a street lamp that's causing this kind of lighting here. And these, I guess these are seams in the suit that I'm working on right there, whereas these are straps on. Because at first I thought maybe those are the edges of armor plates or whatever, and I just don't really think they are. And then after going in with all of these lighter colors here, I'm going to go back in with darker colors and do some glazing of things darker. I'm going to try and get a little more shadow here on some parts of the face. I'm almost wondering if there's sort of a little, yeah, I think this over the nose is actually part of the mask. Okay, that helps. So you will have to forgive me as I try and figure out, okay, what is what on this guy. I'm thinking this has to be lighter here where his neck is, but not too light, because it's sort of double jeopardy here on the shadow. Because there's the shadow being cast by the light of the street light, and then there's just, well, normally would be in shadow anyways. And even here, some of that light, let it be more towards the blue. Got Got some inner seams that we're working on there. So again, I'm gonna reinforce here. Take some of this black, some of that red. Go back to our spokes here. Darken some of these lines. But yeah, I want it to be a little bit richer than say, okay, all we're doing is just taking black. No, we still made a color out of it. We took the black, we took the red. So I think at this point what I'm going to do, because I think that's had a chance to dry, is where's my... Yeah, and this is the Army Painter Anti-Shine. We've done this before. Heck, might have even done it on one of the... Oh yeah, I think we did it on one of the... Oh, what the heck would you call them? The... How do I get this out here? Just throw that right there. One of the Warcry figures. Now you notice I love this stuff because see how it starts out clear? You can barely even see that. But when you use this, you want to use it very lightly. And you can see how, much like the way I painted this, I'm just going to scumble this on here. And of course at first it's going to look shiny because, well, it's wet. But you really want, when this goes on, you want it to be relatively thin like this. I slapped it on the first time I used it, or I think there was one time just in haste. I was in a hurry, and I just slapped it on there, and oh my gosh, that was not the best thing in the world to do, because it actually then got glossy. There, especially on the shield. And hopefully this makes it just a little easier for you guys to see, a little less on the satin side. The other thing it does, well, obviously it's going to seal it and protect it, but it does tend to sort of rejuvenate your white. Let's see, watching this and making peanut brittle. Oh, the peanut brittle. Well, I saw your picture. It was last night. You sent me the picture of the peanut brittle that was underway. Actually, well, the talk of any food right now has me hungry because I was hungry before I even started this. Actually, I'm going to probably take a drink of something here in just a second. And maybe as I let this stuff dry. Now, it does make a difference. I can see that already. It may be very subtle for you guys that are watching. But now, yeah. It takes away some of that satin look. This is another thing too. If you're like me and you're using different materials, different paint lines, some of them might be more flat than others. Like the Creature Caster, Slow Fuse paints are super, super matte. The Chimera colors are super, super matte. Well, you use this, it equalizes everything. It takes away maybe the more satin look of other paints and knocks them down and equalizes them to the look of the other paints. So just gonna give myself another layer here, and then we'll let this dry every night and morning. Make 2 batches. Well, tomorrow is gonna be, there might be close to 100 cookies. Actually, no, there's probably more than 100 cookies to decorate tomorrow, so that's gonna be fun. And that does make a difference with his shield and everything else. Let's go back to get this off my palette now. Start to work on some more lights here being cast by the street light in a few critical areas. Seems to be some metal buckles over here. We'll get those. Get the top edge of his belt. Now the reason we've just not messed with this is that really does need to be in shadow. If you're going to have this kind of a light source above him, and again, the idea is here for folks that are coming in for the first time here, we're trying to create a sort of a street light look. Actually, ooh, I'm going to do this here. So we're making another little in-course change. We always talk about a chain of lights. Well, I'm going to try and create a smaller spoke here. And that's of the street light. Yeah, that's neat. Okay, glad I did that. And what made me think of it, I'm working on his shoulder pad here. Made me think of doing something like this right here. Well, let's double down on that. Let's make it a bit lighter right here. And then we're going to hit some of that here too. And here. And here. Because what's fun is to have this little bit of light over where the darkest part of our spoke is. Not only just where the lightest light is, because, well, it's not even going to translate there. You won't even see it. We're starting to get ourselves some nice shadow there. Speaking of which, I am going to try and scumble in a bit of a darker color on the star right there. That helps. I'm going to go straight up with the white here. On the opposite side of the star there. And then we're going to... All I'm trying to do is work on my edge right here. We're going to do the same here. Now let's work on that A here. Some of these smaller detail things. I don't really know just how shiny they intended some of this stuff to be, so again, I'm just going to have to interpret some things. What might be metal, what might just be a leather pouch. But all the while not wanting to lose my areas that are supposed to be shadows. Okay. I need some kind of extra lights on the face here. Grab a touch of the red here. And for folks that are new, we're using the Green Stuff World paints. We're also trying out the differences between the Green Stuff World Master Medium and the Games Workshop Lamian Medium. Initial analysis was very clear that they both kind of do the same thing, but one most definitely is thicker than the other. The Green Stuff World Master Medium is way thicker than the Lamian Medium. Make of that what you will. It's neither here nor there to me. And I'm going to try and work in some semi-lighter greenish tones over here on this side of the face. Yeah, a little bit of mid-tone action there. And you have to figure, okay, so is this... I think our shadow was in the right place. Remember, we had to modify this a little bit here. Right here. when we took that light, did a little shine on this. This had to be changed, and we're going to do that right now. Here, we'll go back into our yellow again, and just we're doing that stippling partially because, again, the road or street or whatever this is does have a fair amount of texture in it. This is way more stippling than I ever have done before, that's for sure. Alright, now I'm going to try and smooth out some areas here. We're going to go back into a little bit of our yellow and this, again, to follow that. If we're going to have shadows here, we've got to have some light hitting here for some reason. Let's get the tops of the pants there. And every so often I'm going to check on this just to make sure I've got the, what would you say, the sort of sparkle that I want on that shield. Now I'm going to go back, and this is some of the very original, what was that, well, I think that wasn't the Lamy medium. That was actually the, what is that called, the medium, master medium. Yeah. So this is what's been mixed with the paint that I'm using right now, and this is some of our initial glazes here. Remember, I talked about working both ways. Lighter, mid-tones, back into the darks, and now we're just back into those darks again. I looked at the reference picture again and just said, it seems like the one really indicates that the pants are just darker. So that's what we're going with now. Darker and more blue. And reinforce the dark on the star there. Can reinforce the darks on the shoulder pads, on his mask / helmet. Who knows, maybe even on his hands here. We're starting to get a little difference now between the, well, his shirt sleeves, for lack of a better term now, and, say, the pants and the mask and what's on his chest here. We're starting to get some definition there. That's good. And not just a light and dark definition, but more color definition. So this is where the medium is fun. It's okay to work with. It's not my natural thing. It is not. We all have our go-to thing, right? And I gotta say, it is good to change that as often as possible. If anything else, just to keep yourself from getting bored, because that can, and actually it will happen. I've seen it. I've seen it happen definitely often enough. Here, I'm just gonna go. This is the Lamian medium now, and basically turn that into a de facto very thin wash. And you're asking, especially if you're new in here, haven't seen what's been going on for the last, where are we at here? 1 hour 39 minutes. The Green Stuff World paint, it doesn't really like to be on a wet palette. So it's sort of a dry, wet palette that I've got going here. So see, now we've got some of that blue contrasting with our yellow streetlight color. And some of these things like this, you just have to be willing for them not to really show until darn near the very end. And I know it's just difficult. You want that instant gratification. You want to see the fruits of your labor right away. It's only natural. So So again, we're trying to work some blue in here, not just darker, but also more blue. Let's see if we can, on the pants here, where the street light shouldn't be hitting it, work in more of that blue. And it obviously will turn a bit on the greenish side there. Now let's go back to the so I like having the darker blues in here. I'm gonna just keep layering this here. Now that latest Patreon episode with the transparent paints, it was, you couldn't get more different than this, than the way I had to work those. Now part of it was also the big snake creature that I was painting. I mean, it's very different than Captain America here. But still, just the nature of the paint meant working with it very differently than this. It was super translucent, a lot of basically watercolory type effects. All right, let's strengthen a little more of the detail on the A. Let's get some of that now on our shield, because we're working on our spokes here again. Working on those spokes. There's a little bit of a, almost like a de facto kind of horizon line here. And for those that don't know what this is, it is from Marvel Crisis Protocol. It was Atomic Mass Games, I believe, is the name of the company that did these. Starting to work some darks into the fingers here. And just little by little, we enhance our details. Now, if I just painted the face all at once, or only did the shield or whatever, I wouldn't have this whole notion that it kind of sweeps across like this. And in fact, what I might just be tempted to do is another spoke that cuts through here. Not quite so obvious, but kind of a minor spoke there. Because I'm seeing that actually in some of the reference pictures too. There's sort of spokes within spokes, yeah. So that's gonna give it a little bit more of a shininess there. Now let's do some edge stuff on the shield too, where we can. I'm gonna go here, and then on the flip side, on the top edge, not everywhere, because if it's all uniform everywhere around it, it's just gonna look like an outline. There's a nice edge for us. And now I'm going to go back into my yellow with my white. And we're just going to pick out some things on his helmet, on these shoulder pads, and then his, well, shirt basically. And on the, whatever these straps are, I guess they are not armor straps, because I don't really think he has arm. Well, I guess he has the shoulder pads. It's kind of a harness, I suppose. I want to get a little bit of my street light color on his fingers too. That's kind of missing. Couple more indications of the street light color here on his hands. I guess got to get it on the thumb too. So hopefully what we've done down here really does indicate that there is some kind of shadow here. I might even, yeah, I think there's a few areas here on the back of the leg that just need some definition. And I've talked about this multiple times, that tendency to want to put highlights on areas towards the bottom of a figure that really don't necessarily deserve that much light. It's a temptation, no doubt about it. No doubt about it, there's a temptation to hit that with light. And two, if I was using my typical colors, I'd probably be using some different things in different areas. I would certainly be using different techniques here. But I'm essentially trying to adapt to the paint on the fly. Nothing like painting miniatures from a company that you've only painted a few of before, with a paint that you've only ever really used once before, with a sort of a lighting mechanism here with the shadow stuff that you've certainly never tried before. And I actually do, based on shining the light on this, I think I want to actually enhance this a little here. Let's make that a little bit more of a greenish color there. I know it's tough to see. Yeah, I'm going to grab me some of that Lamian medium here, and then we'll just sort of scumble that in. And I think that was what the flashlight indicated. Let's do a little more here. Yeah, I'm like, that's got a little more definition. I'm going to turn this light off. We get our flashlight going here. There. It's coming about this way. So C is, it's almost like I need to have his knee there. So we've got this. Actually, there needs to be a little bit of light over here for some odd reason. That's weird. I know it might not look that way, like it needs to have that on the, when you just look at the miniature itself. So sometimes there's what's real, because the flashlight's telling me to get more light in that one spot. Let's see if I can do it. Again, I'm going to use some Lamian medium here. And try and indicate that, alright, we'll do a little something up here. Now, I'm going to say I need to drag a little more. Yeah. Of the streetlight yellow, we'll just call it that. To the front of this. Again, some more indications of some edges here. Actually, that shoulder probably needs some of the streetlight yellow too. There's a color for you, streetlight yellow. Instead of having to buy it, now you know how to just make it. Let's get some kind of lights here on the and his mask. We worked in plenty of darks. Now let's go the opposite way. And we're going to use sort of our, well, what we call it, the ambient light, the moonlit color. Right there on the corner, that where it goes right over his eyebrow there. More so to indicate that maybe that's it's got kind of a hard edge. So again, using the medium. That's the Lamian medium there. Now we know this is supposed to sort of, well, be a white. Let's see if we can't work that in. Like so. Now let's find, instead of we got the yellow over here, let's find some lighter highlights that are on the cooler side over here. Also going to find some lights on these interior folds here. Just assuming again that this is supposed to be somewhat of a reflective surface. Kind of like his shield. Oh, hey Rodrigo. Well, gracias for joining. Let's see, Navia says, curious to know, were you ever try painting a Gundam kit? No, I don't have any Gundam kits here. I'll actually be doing some 40K vehicles again. I've done tons of, obviously, historical vehicles and dozens of historical vehicles. The Gundam kits, those require, you have to have a certain knowledge to put those things together because they have some pretty fine tolerances. I remember I've seen one or two in person, and boy, there's you mess up, you put too much glue or do something somewhere, those parts are not either fitting together or they're never moving, because that's the wild thing about those Gundam kits, is that they actually are supposed to, the figure still moves and is articulated. That's wild. Now on the face here, I'm looking to do some greens. Oh, I'm going to get some of the blue into here now. It's strange, for as much as I'm trying to indicate shadows and stuff on his face, I also still have to, can't ignore light. That's never a good idea. Just trying to get some kind of shadows around his eyes here. And using the medium instead of water. Can you see that? Well, sort of. And I kind of have to hold it at an angle that's good for me, which is not necessarily a great angle for you guys to see. So what are we at here? We are at 2 hours. Not actually, we're just shy of 2 hours. So we've done a lot of stuff here. We've worked on shadows, as in shadows, cast shadows. Worked on all kinds of wild color transitions. We've been experimenting with a whole new type of paint that we haven't really used before. And I know I say this an awful lot, but boy, you really do have to keep trying new things. You can't just. You may be comfortable. You find something that works and it's real comfortable to stay there, but it'll just get boring. You really will get bored with it. So again, a few here touches to show that the spokes. Let's see if I can't do. I'm gonna again use the medium and some white here and see what we can do to get some very light things going on the shield here. Especially on the band of the shield that's supposed to be white. Like that. Let's see if I can't get a highlight here on this edge. It's going to be tough to see because there's a lot of lights there already. And now here on the wings on the side of his head, I think I want to somehow get some white there too. Maybe even just emphasize the chin a little bit, not sure why. And as always, you're saving. If you're going to do something that's got white in it or whatever, you're saving those for that very end. Because if you start out hitting it with the white, you're just going to be you're locking yourself in. You're backed into a corner. All those sayings apply. I'm debating. See, I've got to get some lighter tones here, but they do need to be in shadow. They really do. And you can see how they get too light too fast. It does not take long. I also want to get some kind of reflected light down here. It's something that's really important, especially when you have this many folds and everything else going on. And it's kind of a sketch and refine. You put down that color, be bold with it, and then let's say okay, I got to smooth out these edges. Well, then you go back in later and you smooth out those edges, as opposed maybe to just trying to layer by layer try and do all this smooth shading of stuff. Well, it's really tough to shade and do the smooth thing. It's much easier just to sketch that in, smooth it out later. You toss the grenade in the room and then you just sort of clean up the parts later. Yeah, we're just going to indicate now against some darks here. I think I need some separation there. Let's grab again more of just using the Lamy and medium here because it's thinner, so it's helpful for what I'm doing now. once again, looking for the separation between these areas on his shield. Not quite sure what all of these are. Now I'm going to go do some glazing here. Again, the salami and medium. We got some of the black, a little bit of the red in there too. And more of the salami and medium. So I can do some things on his boots. Because those just weren't quite. Yeah, there's shadows there, but once I started to put some of these middle tones out, then they started to get really light, so we have to kind of knock them back down again. I'm going to scroll up here, make sure I didn't miss any other. Nope, didn't miss any other questions. There's always a little bit of a lag time too. It's at least 7 seconds from, let's say, when you type something to when I actually see it. Even if I'm looking right at the screen, there's going to be that delay. So just know that. I'm going to try and get some shadows here underneath the shield because, well, it's in shadow. I think we've been pretty successful with at least executing the general idea of what we wanted to get across here. Hopefully this gives you some ideas, if anything else. Maybe you never ever work with the Green Stuff World paints, or you never work with Lamy and Medium. Maybe based on what you see, you say, oh, I gotta give that a try. Or based on what you see, I said, no, I don't really need that. That's the whole point of me doing this. So that you don't have to necessarily find out the hard way what it is that you like or don't like about a paint line or a material or whatever. So now that I've added a bunch of things that have the Lamy and Medium in there, I'll have to do that same thing like I did before with the brush on the anti-shine to kill that shininess that's been added now. I'm gonna see if I can't get some of that blue over on this side too. It's gonna have to be much less pronounced than on the other side, but a little bit here could, yeah. Yeah, that little bit goes a long way. So this is that, remember we talked about the scumbling technique early on? We're doing some of that scumbling now. I'm going to try it there on the flip side of the star there. I need to get a little more light. Underside of that hand certainly needs some. It just can't be nothing. It has to be something. Oh, hey Gary, how's it going? Yeah, we've been hammering away on this thing for a couple hours here. Just playing with some new materials, new techniques on this Captain America here. Just seeing the difference between Lamy and Medium and the Green Stuff World. Oh, what's that called again? The Master Medium. Okay, one of these days I'll remember. But for the moment, we're adding a bunch of the Lamian medium here. And I've also been doing a little more of the stippling. We tried to make ourselves a shadow. See that? Everybody's got a little bit of a shadow going there. And this is the more relaxed phase here, where we're not going back and forth like crazy. Now it's a much more chill. Much more mellow. There sort of is that early kind of hair on fire stage. Now, for me, I don't mind it at all. It's really more, it's hairy for people that are watching because they just freak out. Because they're used to that paint one little small area at a time and that's it. And you don't go anywhere else. You paint that one small area. Wait, paint it till it's done. You know, you really are never going to see that here. That's why you don't, when you see a non-metallic metal tutorial, it's because the entire thing is wearing it, or it's a huge portion of it, because I'm not just going to paint a sword, or just paint a little armor. It's going to be the whole thing. Yeah, so the little wings here on the set, those are finally starting to work their way in. I need to do some reflected light here. That's going to be a challenge to work that in there on many levels. Let's see if I can. That's good. And I'm also going to have it go over the top of some of that yellow. That's better. Let's do some on this side too now. Oh, a touch more. Can't really see that, but I can. Let's see if I can't work in just a touch of blue into his face here and the cheek. That's better. Yeah, the face, there was just some really weird sculpting things on this. And you know, if someone else notices that sort of stuff, feel free to say, hey, yeah, I noticed that too. Once again, we're just working on these, on his face here, trying to figure out what's going on with his lips here and this chin. Think we got that going a little better now. And I also have to remember, this is that thing that we found out early on. Just cannot use really water with the GSW paint. It's just the strangest darn thing. Green Stuff World Master Medium. It is thicker than the Lamian Medium. I think when you mix it with the Green Stuff World paints, you can sort of simulate the contrast paint sort of thickness and texture, I guess. Again, with the Lamian medium, there's, what is it, the contrast medium. You can use that too, I'm sure. However, I'm gonna guess that the Green Stuff World Master Medium costs less and is probably easier to get than, say, the contrast medium, because, well, and there for the longest time I tried to get contrast medium, it was sold out everywhere. I tried for months to get that stuff, to basically sort of do some experiments like what we've done with this guy. Okay. So I'm going to do the thing with my... Oh, where'd that go? This is, again, the Army Painter Anti-Shine. We'll hit that once more. Like I said, I love this stuff because all the other mediums, for whatever reason, start out like looking like Elmer's glue. It's the darndest thing. And as always, we have to put this on lightly. Let's put this over the areas that we've been working here. And I know the shield needs some because I worked in a new spoke on our wheel there. We did some stuff on the face, so we're going to hit the face with this. It's amazing the difference that it makes. And the, hey, plus side too, it's really protects things. And the benefit of the brush on stuff, well, doesn't matter that it's 10 degrees outside, or if you're living somewhere where it's 90 degrees and humid outside, it doesn't matter. It's all just hopefully in a much more climate controlled area, which is the interior of your house. So there will be some brief shininess here as I obviously go over these parts, and then that will subside as this dries. As always, I could work on this for hours more, depending on what it is I'm trying to do, but this can't be a 6-hour long video. We're already at 2 hours and 12 minutes. And I think we were just trying to get the point across. Here, while he dries a little bit, let's just bring out some of the other ones that we did. These are previous live sessions, also from Marvel Crisis Protocol, and I will link these two. If you check out the end of the video, at the end screen, you'll see links to those videos there, painting those two, and then I'll be doing more from the Hellboy game also, if you're really into your comic book stuff and superheroes. And if you want to subscribe and click that bell, that notification bell, that's always good because that'll let you know when I'm doing a crazy live session like this. And my voice is starting to go because I've been doing this for hours now. Voice kind of has a finite period that it lasts, and then after a while it just kind of says, nope, we're not cooperating anymore. But if you want to give the Patreon page a glance there, this really is a minor taste. All of these videos here, just have to look in the chat. Was it 240 some odd hours that you get when you do that Army Painter pledge? Yes, it shocks me too. Well, it especially shocks me because I was there for all those hours. Again, just working in some final details in dark. So here we got that, again, that cool light, but then we start to have sort of that street light effect. We got some shadow there. Here, let's maybe build up the shadow a little bit here. Just a parting thing here. We'll work up that shadow. There we go. So thanks again, everybody. Aviad, Gary, Trevor, Rodrigo. And I want to make sure I hit everyone. Oh, and Ken. Fruity Toots was in here. Bethany, hope you have a great day too. And Al Capone. Oh, and First Last, who was first. And Falcon was in here too. So thanks again, everybody. I'll catch you on the next session. See you then.